Yes, I think our team, from a base standpoint, has moved forward. But you only get so many opportunities in this game, right? And that's where sort of some of the regrets still hits you. That you can't count on what your health is going to be over 162 games over the long haul. But by and large, I think there's a youth still on this team that are really good players. And I think that's going to show up over 162 next year.
It's Mike Hazen, general manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks, on earlier this week with Wolf and Luke here on Arizona Sports on moving past the disappointing end, the bitter end of last season when they fell just short of the playoffs. Didn't get a chance to defend their National League pennant in the postseason, but now the work begins because the offseason, the hot stove, it's a lot hotter than it used to be, or a lot less hot than it used to be in terms of splashy early signings and player movement. It's way more deliberate now, but there's work to be done for the Diamondbacks, and there's a lot of burning questions, and you cover the Diamondbacks. You're part of their broadcast team, so I don't think we've spoken or had you on the show since the season ended.
Yeah, like you said,
start
it was
there.
Abbreviated. Yeah, just the way that it ended, that final week was just, it's still kind of hard to believe. Mm-hmm. I've had people say to me, and you were in Milwaukee, and I was like, yes, I was there for that. And I didn't think that was going to doom this team for that final week, but I guess there was a hangover there, and there was the other thing that I had heard. And, this is a team that when they're going well, it's like, yeah, no one loss is we're resilient, right? So, hey, we give up even an 8-run lead, which was, ridiculous. It was rough. But, okay, we're going to move forward, and even facing tough pitching, we're going to be okay. The other kind of sentiment that I heard was, the Padres pitching was pretty good. And
yes,
to face them in the final 3 games was not ideal. And then, of course, they had, Brandon Pfaadt had a bad outing against the Giants. It just was this combination of all these bad things that happened to combine for them to lose 5 out of 7. And so there you are, waiting on that last day. It was so surreal that last day. I went out to Chase Field just kind of hoping something wacky, I think it has to be something ridiculous that would have happened for that to work out, right? Because those two teams were going to make it in some way, somehow.
It was such a foregone conclusion.
And, but players were out there, and, Zach Allen's out there throwing, getting ready, in theory, maybe getting ready for something, and families were there. Gino Suarez and his family, Brent Strom was there, and Torey Lovello. Everybody was there, and then it was just this empty feeling. And yet it's an 89-win team. Mm-hmm. So, does this team need a major overhaul? Absolutely not. They have a great core. They have a lot of young talent. They have a lot of pitching. So I think the biggest thing everyone clearly is Christian Walker, and what kind of, I think if the Yankees are going after him, as is rumored, that's a tough one, and there's going to be a lot of teams. But that's the thing, is there's going to be a lot of options for Christian Walker, and it just depends on what the numbers are. I think absolutely the Diamondbacks, will have conversations with him. I would hope.
Yes, but the projections I'm seeing, and correct, tell me if you're seeing different projections, but it's kind of in the neighborhood. The Walker camp's looking for 3 years, which might be a difficulty for some teams because he is in his mid-30s already. Tremendous baseball player. 3 years, $60 million. Seems to be kind of the average of the projections that I'm seeing.
Right.
Is that a neighborhood that the Diamondbacks can play in? And if the Yankees say, hey, we'll go 3 and 65, I mean, what's the limit? Because I think Christian Walker is an incredibly important part of what they do. He's the backbone of the defense. Yeah. He's a team leader. He gives you pop. I think that would be a tremendous loss.
I agree. And for me, the other thing that intangibly, when you say, the backbone of the defense and what he does on the field, and then in the clubhouse, I can't tell you how many times we go in there and looking for answers on something, and he is always there to talk about it and give a really thoughtful response, not just there because he feels like he has to be, or anything like that. And just, I think the other thing that he established was, and you've got Corbin Carroll too, who's the young player that does this, but the work ethic that he shows and that standard and I think that really is underrated when you think about Ketel Marte, because I think he really helped him see, how you go about it, how you go about the pregame, how you go about even in the off season, like what you expect from yourself. So it is. And when you talk about the numbers, I think I've also seen, projections are what they are. I saw like a 3-year, the high end would be 3 years, like 70.
I saw that
And,
it's high end, yeah.
It just depends on what's really there. And, to a lesser extent, and I'm not comparing the two because I think there's going to be a real want by some teams to go after and get Christian Walker more than Lourdes Gurriel Jr. last year. But it just shows you can't discount it. You can't ever discount the fact that a guy might be wanting to come back for the right amount. I think financially, though, it does depend on things like, can they trade Jordan Montgomery or can they trade I think that's the big candidate.
Can they trade Jordan Montgomery, and how much of a salary are they eating if they
that's
trade
the other question.
They're going to eat some salary there.
They're going to have to if they want to trade him.
Right now they're talking. It doesn't surprise me. Look, Torey Lovullo and Mike Hazen have said like they can see him pitching for this team, but you have to wonder, is there the whole thing was just, it really felt uncomfortable even last year because he was uncomfortable with his situation, and
from day one.
It was.
Would you say the owner made it more or less comfortable after the season?
Oh, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, there's nothing that Ken Kendrick said that wasn't inaccurate. I mean, it was not a good decision, and it was not a good. And Jordan Montgomery would tell you it was a really bad year, but of course,
but should that have been public?
Right. Yeah, when you actually say it, it's a little different, right? Coming from the top, and so. Can it be smoothed over? Do they even want that? Is there some other solution? There's always a solution, right? And so I think that there's going to be, I think it's a possibility. But when you talk about trading other pitching, I mean, the other guys that are in that rotation, they were all there from the beginning, and you see them as one going forward. So it is the outlier.
But I think the Zach Gallen question is maybe not being talked about as loudly as it need to be because he's on the cusp of free agency after this year. If he has a decent year, he's going to command a lot of money. And are the Diamondbacks prepared to lose him for free agent compensation, if nothing else, draft compensation?
No, you're right, because that is always something that's on the table. The only thing, when you look at the other side of that, though, is like he's been a centerpiece of all of that trade in 2019. It's kind of been, what Mike Hazen wanted to build around, and they certainly have had great seasons and great performances out of Zach Gallen, but I think again they're looking at everything right now.
I think they want to see what the ceiling for Brandon Pfaadt and Ryan Nelson is also. Like, can either of those guys be legit number 2 or aces in their future?
I think,
and then you think about the future of Zach Gallen after that.
It's funny, Jarrett, you bring up the Ryan Nelson. I think Brandon Pfaadt I think we see that he can be. He had some, he had some rough patches here and there, but I think we saw enough to know he can be a top of the rotation guy. I don't know, I don't know about ace maybe yet, but Ryan Nelson, the step that he took last year,
that was the most promising
huge.
thing on the entire pitching staff.
It really
me.
was.
Yeah.
It really was, Vince. I mean, you cannot deny that what he showed, because even last year started the season. He led for a time in hits per 9. He was getting hit around, and everything changed. I mean, the effectiveness of his fastball, his cutter, as much as so many things went wrong with the pitching last year, that was one thing that absolutely went right, and it changes the dynamic for the D-backs, because now you see, as Jared pointed out, the 2 pitchers, really you look at that as 2 guys that you can count on for the future.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before, too. If you consider every member of the pitching staff, and if you were going to compare, the guys that came back, their 2023 seasons to their 2024 seasons, I only feel confident in saying Ryan Nelson took a step forward. Mm-hmm. You can make a real strong case for Justin Martinez with the ups and downs, but I don't think anybody else did. And that's why the Diamondbacks announced a new pitching coach earlier this week.
It was. I looked at it, and just Gallen being off and on injured at times, and Merrill Kelly being gone for Merrill Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez being gone for so long. I mean, it just took them time to work their way back.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting, you've also got an interesting case in Eduardo Rodriguez.
Yes.
What exactly is he going to give you? And how will, I think, as much as, believe me, I love Brent Strom and everything that he brought, and I think that whoever is there, there's going to be a lot to work on with Erod in kind of kind of making his stuff more effective. I think there's a path to that for sure, but
also,
making his
when
stuff
things
more effective.
when things were going wrong for like Seawald and Montgomery, they just couldn't stop it. They couldn't fix it.
No.
So that's one of the things where he's like, well, maybe they
Paul
need to know.
Sewald, that's another situation where that went. We see this with closers where they drop off and they can't, and it's over. And that was a huge problem with this team. Once they lost him at the back end, you lost that stability.
Thanks for watching Bickley and Marotta. Click to see the latest Bickley Blast and hit the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.